right, the crowd is still building, but we are going to go ahead and get started again. Welcome tonight, everyone, to Town Hall number 6. We felt it very important to start discussing some constitutional issues through Ohio's Future Foundation with our chairman, Congressman Jim Renacci. Tonight's topic is creating a sanctuary for freedom in Ohio, and discussing two of those issues on that agenda tonight, discussing our First and Second Amendment issues in the state. Um, I'm going to kick it over to former Congressman Jim Renacci, Chairman of Ohio's Future Foundation, to get us started.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for joining tonight. This, as Tom said, is our 6th town hall. You know, prior to COVID, we were traveling the state as Ohio's Future Foundation, talking about issues that affect Ohio, talking about issues on why Ohio is falling behind, talking about economic issues, and most recently, in the 5 town halls before this, we talked about how we're taxed too much, we spend too much. We talked about the shutdowns and the closures. We talked about Medicaid. We're going to continue to talk about issues so that people really understand that Ohio is falling behind. And the best place to get some of that information is Ohio's Future Foundation website, jimrenacci.com website. And quite frankly, another great report out there, you can get it at jimrenacci.com, is a report that was done by University of Akron and Ball State, which basically was completed in November, talks about how and why. These are economists in both of these universities talking about how and why Ohio can't compete and how they're falling behind. Another good report. Again, you can get that at jimrenacci.com. Let me, for those that this is your first time to get to know who Jim Renacci is, just a quick summary. Jim Renacci came to Ohio 39 years ago, started his first business with just a couple $100, went from 1 business to 60 businesses, created over 1,500 jobs, and employed over 3,000 people. During that period of time, I always believed in giving back. I was a baseball coach. I was a firefighter for many years in my hometown. I even was a mayor, the mayor of my town. When it was struggling, I agreed to take that role on while I was running all my businesses to try and turn the city around. And I'm proud to say that I was able to do that as well. So always giving back was important to me. I had a dealership in Wadsworth, Ohio that I took over and was able to rebuild it back into a dealership that was growing and booming, 58 employees. And then one day, we talk about government overreach. President Obama and the federal government took over General Motors, even though I had an agreement with them, even though I had a contract to build a brand new location on the highway. General Motors was taken over by the federal government. And then the federal government, believe it or not, we seem to forget that, picked and choose what was an essential business and what wasn't. Took away my constitutional right and decided that my business was not one that was going to be able to continue to grow and prosper, and that my 58 and 59 employees would not be able to be employed anymore. I called my congressman, didn't know much about Congress at that time. Of course, he came right to the facility, wanted to talk to everybody, wanted a donation like always, and told me that he would vote to help reinstate my dealership. I can tell you when he went back to Washington and there was a vote to reinstate car dealers, he voted against it. And that was when I finally felt like I was kicked in the stomach for the final time and decided I was going to run for Congress. I was an outsider, still an outsider. I still remember when the inside and the establishment said, you know, you're not an insider. There are others, or it's not your turn. You heard all those stories. Long story short, I ran a race and 14 months later became the U.S. Congressman in Ohio's 16th district. 2 years later, was redistricted again and had to run another race against another Democrat, and Betty Sutton, for those that know Northeast Ohio, and I was able to beat her. I was in Congress for 8 years. In about the 6th year, I realized that Washington was seriously broken. They were trying to infringe on so many of our rights and so many of our, and look at what they're spending. I mean, we can talk about that in a whole nother issue, but I finally realized that the only place we can fix Washington is back in Ohio. I came back to Ohio, announced I was running for governor. Josh Mandel stepped out of the Senate race. Then I got the call from President Trump asking me to get in a Senate race with only 9 months left. I jumped into a Senate race I often talk about that race because it was something I did really for the president. But running a Senate race with only 9 months is very difficult. And I found out that I almost defeated a guy, very close race, but I was able to get around Ohio again and meet so many people and start talking about the issues that are affecting Ohio. Tonight's, we're really talking about sanctuary state, a protection state, our First Amendment, our Second Amendment. We got two great co-hosts with me. Uh, First one is John Kropp. John, you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to thank Jim for the opportunity to participate in this call tonight with Chris Dorr. I appreciate everything that Jim is doing with Ohio's Future Foundation and his conservative principles and ideas that he has for the state of Ohio. Obviously, I think a lot like him, and we are falling behind as a state. My wife and I both work in the health insurance industry, so we lived through those Obama years, and we saw how Obamacare wrecked many employers and wrecked the healthcare industry, and we lived it day to day. And unfortunately, now we're going right back into uncertain times again with that. I am the Greene County Republican Party Executive Chair as well, and chair the Greene County Board of Elections. And proud to say that I think we here in Greene County are one of the most conservative counties in all of the 88 counties in Ohio. So therefore, we do support the Constitution. We do support liberty and freedom and fight for it every day here in Greene County. So I really appreciate the opportunity to participate tonight.
Thank you, John. And also joining us, a big advocate for Second Amendment, Chris Dorr. Chris, you want to give us a little bit of a background on yourself?
Sure, absolutely. I'm happy to be here tonight. Thanks for the invite. Whenever there is an invitation to fight for gun rights on behalf of our members and supporters, I'm willing to come and talk. So pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Chris Dorr. I'm the director for Ohio Gun Owners. Maybe you guys can see that banner in the background. We're a grassroots mobilization organization. We're pretty well known for standing up against the gun control bills in the Ohio General Assembly. And we fight very hard to try to pass pro-gun bills like Stand Your Ground law and constitutional carry, the Second Amendment Preservation Act. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about here tonight, we're kind of on the forefront of pushing for it. I'm the husband of one, my wife Lydia. We have 7 children. I'm not from Ohio originally. I was born and raised in Northwest Iowa. Ohio Gun Owners is headquartered out of the Lancaster area. I fight for gun rights in a variety of different states, primarily here in Ohio and as well as Pennsylvania. And as kind of in my role as the director for grassroots mobilization organizations across the country, we've been very successful at getting thousands of people involved in the fight for gun rights and harnessing that power to defeat gun control in bills all across the country. Liberal states like Minnesota and other states like Missouri. Here in Ohio, obviously, we've killed off many gun control bills over the few short years that we got started. And I'm very happy to play the part that I do for our Second Amendment freedoms. And I'm happy to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And it's kind of interesting because for those of you, first we're going to go to defending free speech, but I want to go back to what Chris was talking about. President Biden did his first town hall or whatever he called it, his first talk with reporters, and he basically said gun control will be a matter of timing. Remember that, because that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. You're going to have a president pushing for gun control. We already have a governor pushing for gun control. We're getting double hit. We really do need a sanctuary state. But before we go into that, let's talk about defending free speech, which is also something that we have to be able to do. And as you know, as the last couple months and even the last year has occurred, we've seen so many opportunities where whether big tech, government has stepped in and tried to take away some of our free speech rights. Do you want to go to the next slide and we can talk about some of those issues as well? By the way, while we're moving to the next slide, I want to make sure everybody knows that's on the show tonight, the program tonight. You're going to have an opportunity to ask questions, but also give us comments. This is the way that John and Chris and I are going to learn from you as well. Sometimes it's not about giving you facts, it's about listening to you as well. But let's look at the four major erosions of the First Amendment. And John, do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Sure. I mean, obviously everybody has been paying attention to the news. I mean, cancel culture is up there at the top of the list. I mean, we've seen Senator Josh Hawley attacked. We've seen Marjorie Taylor Greene attacked to where they want to remove them from even committees as elected officials in Washington, D.C. over positions that they've taken. Senator Hawley was going to publish a book through Simon and Schuster. They dropped him simply because, probably, I mean, his book, The Tyranny of Big Tech, talks exactly about, what big tech is doing as far as towards our First Amendment rights. And so he went and found a conservative publisher. He's still going to get his book published. Mike Lindell, a great conservative, probably one of the greatest American success stories out there, a man that truly was down on the street, homeless, a drug addict, and he built a company like My Pillow, and now is a true American success story. He questioned the election fraud, so he saw companies like Bed Bath and Beyond, Kohl's drop his products. Hopefully, the conservatives out there that were pushing to buy his products online, to boycott Bed Bath and Beyond, Kohl's, things like that, can make a statement with their pocketbooks and say, hey, look, just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean that their opinion doesn't count and their words should be silenced. J.K. Rowling, she, tweeted out about transgenders and, fought some backlash from that. So, we're being attacked on all four fronts, as far as having that ability to say what we want. Social media is shutting down people for simple things of sharing a post. And I've seen more people, are banned from Facebook for 30 days at a time for simply sharing a post. And now you hear congressmen wanting to put people that attend, gun rights rallies and things like that and being put on American domestic terror list. I mean, 5, 10, 15 years ago, we never thought that if we attended a gun rally, that perhaps we would end up on a no-fly list. And that's where we are today. And that's a scary point to be, or a scary place to be in 2021. And if we think that, having a Democrat controlled Congress and Senate is not going to continue to erode away at our First Amendment rights, we're crazy. I wish more and more congressmen in Washington, D.C. would be standing up, being a little bit more vocal about our rights and about what's happening. But they're not. So I think it's going to be the American people that are going to have to stand up and fight for those rights to keep them from being eroded away. Right here, one of the other scary things that happened right here this week, President Biden came to Columbus, and the local media reported that there would be no media access to his visit to the Wexner Medical Center. That the administration would have their own press pool there and photographers there, and then they would issue photos and statements back out to our press. Right there on the southern border, if it hadn't been for a congressman taking some cell phone photos, we would never see some of the photos we've been seeing from the southern border, because they're not permitting the media to even go to some of the detention centers on the southern border. So, I mean, that's the kind of things that happen in North Korea and China, where the media does not have access to report these things accurately. As much as we, dislike the media at times, I firmly believe they all should still have access. And I think even the media is are starting to see some of these things where they can't go to the southern border and report on some of the crisis that's happening down there right now.
Yeah.
Chris? Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I think I can see that Jim's mic is muted, but I got to be honest with you. Before all this stuff happened with Mike Lindell, I did not own a My Pillow, and by gosh, I have one now. So that was one of the first things I did. They started coming after him, was go out and buy one for myself. But I couldn't agree with you more, John. I mean, they are clamping down on everybody. I like to focus on the gun rights community, but we're seeing this in every facet of life now, where they're coming after us. I just got done with a ban myself on Facebook. They target the left, some of the anti-gunners. They definitely target our Facebook pages to try to bring them down on a consistent basis. And we got to stand up and do something. We have to start doing it now, or it'll be too late.
Yeah, I feel inadequate at times. I'm the only one that's never been banned from Facebook for 30 days, and here I thought my stuff was as controversial as anybody's.
Well, you can bump those numbers up. You can bump them up. But and unless Jim wanted to jump in here for a minute, but there's another whole aspect to this whole censorship thing, and it actually came to fruition today. Or maybe it was yesterday. I did an interview with the Columbus Dispatch, and one of their political reporters, and one of the things he was asking me was, well, shouldn't like Ohio gun owners, shouldn't you guys be forced to disclose who your membership is, who supports your organization, who is behind it, and stuff like that? And I said, absolutely not. There's no part of the First Amendment that requires you to do so without anonymity, for lack of a better term. And I talked about some historical examples, but what they would love nothing more to do is to have us publish our list and let the left start going after the police officers that are members of Ohio gun owners, the public office holders that are members of Ohio gun owners, who are all exercising their First Amendment right to associate with organizations that fight for them. And you could tell that this member of the media would absolutely love for us to be able to be forced to reveal exactly who believes what, so they can dox people like us in this cancel culture. And we're very much opposed to that.
Well, I think it goes right back to COVID as well. And now we've got the vaccination cards. And, are you going to have a show a vaccination card to go to a concert in the summer? You're going to have to show a vaccination card to hop on an airplane these days. I mean, that's all part of our First Amendment rights. And, we shouldn't have to show papers in this country to fly domestically.
Nope.
Well, look, I know we've talked that subject. We want to get on to the Second Amendment, and I also wanted you all to know that I had a little technical difficulty. I had to switch over to my phone, so if the picture looks a little different or the voice is a little difficult, for some reason my computer lost its internet. So first time that's ever happened in our sixth town hall. But let's move on to the next slide, because we want to give people the opportunity to ask questions and talk. And now that I'm on my phone, I'm going to turn it over to Chris when it comes to gun rights, because my phone will not show me the next slide. So Chris, you want to go into that?
Yeah, you bet. So in the world of defending our Second Amendment freedoms and our state constitutional freedoms, there's kind of a two-prong approach that the left, that the gun control advocates are taking. There's a federal one, and there is a state one. Obviously, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Chris Murphy, all these radical lunatics in DC, they are cramming on the stuff from the federal side. But here in Ohio, we have not only just Mike DeWine, Republican Governor Mike DeWine, but we've also got now we have these moderate Republicans that are joining with him, in addition to the Democrats. And so, and let's just go through some of the things that they're fighting for, that they're trying to pass right now. First, and not probably not foremost, I don't think these are necessarily in order, but one of the primary things that they're focusing on right now is red flag gun confiscation orders. These things, and I can just go through this list here really quick. They eliminate due process for gun owners. They allow somebody to and let me explain that too. They eliminate due process because they allow somebody to come in and petition a court, oftentimes at ex parte hearings where you're not even allowed to defend yourself against the facts or the evidence that your accuser is presenting against you. And a judge, a liberal judge, what are increasingly called activist judges, they can issue a confiscation order against your firearm freedoms, and your guns can be taken away from you, your firearms can be taken away from you without you ever being convicted of a crime. Now, a lot of people will say, "Oh, no, we've got due process in there. We allow you to come in and try to prove your innocence after your guns are confiscated," and that's what we like to say that's a total bastardization of the idea of due process. It's innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until you can prove you're innocent to the court. And so they're very bad. Governor DeWine has been championing these bills ever since he got sworn into office, and especially following the August 4, 2019 killings in Dayton, where that guy ignored every single law that was on the book and murdered those people. Governor DeWine has been pushing for it very hard with his Strong Ohio plan. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So that's number one, red flags, gun confiscation orders. Number two, they want to try to pass universal background checks, AKA statewide gun registration. Now, a lot of people think to themselves, "Oh, I'm not opposed to background checks." And to be clear, nobody wants a madman running around with a gun. Nobody likes a criminal having a firearm. But the fact is, the criminals never obey the laws anyway. You can think of any mass killing in recent memory. Think of the Boulder, Colorado killer. He passed his background check. The Atlanta killer passed his background check. The Pulse nightclub, the Fort Hood killings, the Aurora movie theater out in Colorado. You just name a mass shooting, they've all passed their background checks. And yet we see the radical left, not just in DC, but also here in Ohio, we see them pushing these expansions of this NCIC database program. And you have to ask yourself why. And the reason why is very simple, because universal background checks, this NCIC database, is the foundation of the Democrat plan for gun confiscation at some point down the road. And quite frankly, the only way for universal background checks to work is the government has to have a registration or a database, a registry of every single gun in the country. And I think everybody here on this panel agrees that nobody wants the Biden administration, the Merrick Garland Department of Justice, to have a list of every gun and gun owner in the country. That's not what a free country looks like. So that's number two, universal background checks or universal gun registration. Number three, they're pushing very hard, and we saw this now in the wake of what happened in Colorado on Tuesday. They're trying to reintroduce the Feinstein assault weapons ban and the high capacity magazine ban. And I want to be very clear. Not only are they trying to push that in Congress, but they're trying to push that here in Ohio too. Mike DeWine is a huge proponent of the assault weapons ban. In fact, he was the Republican in 2004 who joined and partnered with Dianne Feinstein herself to reintroduce the assault weapons ban, the Clinton gun ban that had expired that year after having passed first in 1994. So it's being pushed at the federal level with Joe Biden and the radical left. It's being pushed right here in Ohio with Mike DeWine and the radical left, be they Republican or be they Democrats. It's being pushed here as well, and we need to stand up and fight back against this stuff.
Thank you, Chris. And again, you're exactly right. These are the issues that, whether it's Mike DeWine, President Biden, these are the rights that are going to be taken away from us. And let's face it, you spelled that out pretty well. I mean, Governor DeWine was part of that group of senators, a group of 8, who really wanted to take away our gun rights. And he's just bringing that back around the table. He keeps talking about it. He tried to put it in the budget this year as a budget issue. We have to be careful when it comes to all this, because these are the kind of issues that if we're not prepared for, and we don't understand that the governor's trying to slip these, whether it's in the budget or in some other piece of legislation, we have to be prepared for it. So we have another slide coming up. I can't see my slides through the phone, as I said.
Yeah, I'll just, in addition, obviously, oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to jump in and dominate the conversation. So, but when it comes to the pro-gun side, can you hear us now, Jim?
I can hear you.
Okay. And you can tell me to let it go to somebody else if you want to, but on the flip side, obviously, to the gun control is what we're trying to do in the state of Ohio to combat what we see coming at us through DeWine's gun control agenda or through the federal gun control agenda. And they're pretty simple. We saw through these shutdowns, we've seen a massive decrease in access to the CHL license issuing system. So one of the primary things we're trying to do right now in the Ohio General Assembly, and we just introduced the bill yesterday, is pass House Bill 227, which is constitutional carry. If this bill is passing in states all across America, if Ohio would pass, it would be the 18th or 19th state. I don't know if the Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has signed it yet or not. But what constitutional carry is very simple. It gets government out of the rights regulation business. A lot of people in government, they kind of screw this up, but they forget that the Second Amendment was written not as a restriction on people like us or people like you, but it's actually a restriction on government. They don't like to hear that, but constitutional carry gets government out of that whole process. And it's sweeping America like crazy. We're fighting for that here in Ohio. One of the really big things that's really picking up steam right now from the grassroots is we all see what's happening over there in DC, and I'm pointing to the east over there. We see what's happening over there with Biden's gun control agenda. We saw HR 8 pass last week. We saw HR 1446 pass, these universal gun registration bills. We see Joe Biden, just like he said yesterday and today, that this gun control is going to pass. It's just a matter of time. One of the biggest things that we can do as a state, one of the biggest things that the state legislature can do to get in between the rights of the individual that we have and this federal gun control, is by passing what's called the Second Amendment Preservation Act. It's already introduced here in Ohio. It's House Bill 62. We were very happy to help Representative Michael Loychik introduce that legislation. But what it simply does is it says that, okay, Biden administration, you can pass your federal gun control, but we know you don't have the resources to enforce federal gun control at a national level. So what this bill does, it says, no, you cannot commandeer state and local resources in order to enforce your gun control laws. It's a very old idea. It's called the anti-commandeering doctrine. It's got massive Supreme Court precedent backing this idea up. In fact, Prince versus, I should have had this court case ready, but back in the 1990s, there were some sheriffs in Nevada that said, no, we're not going to enforce the Brady bill that Clinton and people like John Kasich and DeWine as Congress members voted for. We're not going to enforce the Brady bill. And the Supreme Court said, you know what? That's your right. Well, the Congress does not have the right to force the states to enforce federal laws. And so we're pushing hard for that bill right now in Ohio. And we're looking forward to a vigorous discussion on it.
Yeah, it's tough to have a whole lot of confidence in our state General Assembly to back something like that right now. Just with the way the state has been run in Columbus lately.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Strong Ohio. And I appreciate, Chris, you taking a little bit of control of this thing for a while I was trying to get my computer back up. But Strong Ohio, many of you know, and Chris mentioned this is something Governor DeWine is pushing. It leaves it, these are just some notes, leaves it up to judges to decide someone's mental acuity. Left-wing judges can abuse their power and rule conservatives mentally unstable. I know people will chuckle about that, but that's true. The act allows any family member or neighbor to make a complaint with or without cause. This is one of the biggest issues when it comes to Strong Ohio legislation that the governor wants. You could have a couple that's in a marital dispute, and the wife or the husband can complain about the others without cause, and that individual's gun and rights could be taken away from them. Legal gun owners are forced to defend their sanity to own a firearm. Liberals mental condition. Will this one warrant the seizure of guns? And look, the act is ineffective. Gun crimes are committed by people who seem completely sane. That's the problem. If we're going to do anything, and I used to say this when I was in Washington, we should be strengthening our mental health laws, not touching our gun laws. Another thing on Strong Ohio, the state already has a way to assist those with suicidal tendencies. You know, the governor wants to throw that in and saying, well, this is the reason for it. It's already a law that if someone is considered a threat to themselves, that their guns be confiscated with court approval. The voluntary background system shifts penalties for selling to a prohibited person unintentionally. And it goes on. Law enforcement can now go through your medical records. The scope of medical is not just limited, and law enforcement can use anything to justify taking the guns. This is what Governor DeWine wants passed. Remember that. This is what your governor wants passed. Do we have a part? Next slide.
Did we lose Jim?
Yeah, part 3, the police officer can decide to voluntarily commit someone. Courts can decide somewhat haphazardly to involuntarily commit someone. Criminals don't use background checks. Think about that. I mean, criminals can get guns. They don't use background checks. This is why the Strong Ohio legislation is an overreach by our current governor. Avoids addressing the real problems, which is funding of mental health, which I talked about, and weapon possession penalties are on par with murder and rape. Chris or John, do you want to touch on anything when it comes to Strong Ohio?
I think, one of the big things, I mean, like you said, somebody could have a domestic dispute with a spouse and they get their guns taken away. And then, like Chris mentioned, you're guilty until proven innocent. And it's up to that individual then to fight for their rights to get their guns back, which could be a lengthy process and an expensive process. Why should any citizen of the state of Ohio be subject to that?
Yeah. And I thought something that you talked about just a second ago, Jim. I always chuckle when I hear this because you had said something that liberals are already called. Liberals already accuse us conservatives of having a mental disorder, and yet they want judges to sit there and adjudicate whether or not you can have a gun. And some of these liberal judges, they can't even decide that boys are supposed to use the boys' bathroom and girls are supposed to use the girls' bathroom. That's the level of competence that we're seeing out of these people, and yet they want those types of people to sit in judgment over whether or not we can exercise and enjoy our freedoms. We say no. No.
Well, absolutely. And look, these are some more parts of the plan. The governor has already admitted that nothing in this bill would have stopped the mass killing in Dayton last summer, but this is what is in the bill. Eliminates private gun sales entirely by de facto background check.
Yes.
This leads a government list of gun owners, which gets back to that First Amendment, right? The bill allows the seizing of guns a person has access to, meaning they can seize other people's guns. And if someone has their firearm seized and is found sane, they require a quarter to get them back. That is so ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But this again is what your governor in Ohio is trying to put.
I think Strong Ohio was a reaction to a madman that shot up, the Oregon district in Dayton. And, it was like, hey, here's our opportunity to push gun legislation, just like on the national level. We've had, unfortunately, a couple mass shootings in the last week. And, as soon as you have that mass shooting, what's the first thing? The vice president goes on TV and says, hey, we need gun legislation, even though, 3 days ago she was on TV stating, no one was going to come after anyone's guns. The truth is they want your guns. I mean, they can sugarcoat it, candy coat it. They want your ammo. They want your guns, and they will be coming after them.
So let's, I know we've went through a lot of details here, a lot of good discussion, a lot of good facts. Let's go to some questions now. Tom, do you want to open this up to the audience?
Yeah, first we're going to move to first question will be from Linda. I think we have Linda queued up. Make sure you unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to ask a question. I've been a gun owner for years, and I'm very disturbed by those who want to take my gun rights away, including President Biden, our Governor DeWine, and even our legislature. I want to know what specifically can I do, or we do, all the people on this call, to protect against DeWine and the left-leaning gun grabbers. It kind of seems like they don't really want to listen to we the people.
So thank you for your question, Linda. Here's two things I would tell you. Number one, the best way to protect ourselves from the federal government is to have a strong Ohio legislature and a strong Ohio governor who's going to protect us from the federal overreach. So you need to talk to your legislators. You need to make sure that you want your Second Amendment rights protected, but you've got to make sure that in the 2022 election, we're putting people in these offices who are going to protect our rights as well. Chris, John, do you want to comment?
Well, I agree 100%. Call those state legislators, let them know your position. Get behind groups like Chris's that are obviously fighting for your rights daily. Make your voice known. Those that sit quietly at home will see their rights slowly taken away from them. Your state legislators have to know, look, if you vote a certain way, I will not be voting for you. They're all about reelection. So we need to make our voices known to each and every one of them.
I would say that a lot of the political class wants everybody, especially gun owners, they want you to believe that the political power in the state is what happens in Columbus, that whatever happens up there underneath that dome, that's the political reality. That's where, if you want to change anything, that's where you have to go. The power is with the people of the state of Ohio. So if you're a gun owner and you love freedom, you love this country and this state, you need to get very active with your legislators. Now, remember, your politicians, your legislators, they're very good at saying what they need to in order to get you to go away. We need, as a gun rights community, we need to be like a dog on a bone right now while our freedoms are under attack, and be in constant contact with your legislators, demanding that they stand up and fight for our freedoms. That's what we do here at Ohio Gun Owner, that's for sure.
Hey, Chris, I know there was a question that was written. Do you have a list of those that support Second Amendment rights? And do you have a list of the legislators who, support? I'm pretty sure all the Democrat legislators support the Strong Ohio legislation. There are some Republicans that support it as well, I believe. Do you have a list of those? That was one of the questions.
Well, we have a spreadsheet that we constantly maintain about what legislators have voted a certain way. I don't think it's a public one, but what we have found is we don't publish a list of pro-gun legislators because all too oftentimes in politics, we see politicians go bad. So we don't want our words being used against us, but you can always call us and ask us a question about your legislator. We will happily give you our opinion or their voting record on what they've done. But yeah, what you said there, Congressman Renacci, is very true. There are moderate rhino Republicans now who are openly endorsing and espousing this gun control agenda. People like Senator Stephanie Coonsey, for example. She introduced red flags. She's a Republican, Senate District 16 on the west side of Columbus. She introduced red flags gun confiscation orders just this week. And there's
And I believe Senator Dolan has also supported it.
yes, Senator Matt Dolan was the bill sponsor, the guy who carried DeWine's water. So you could call him DeWine's water boy. And he's the state senator up from there, up from on the right in the south side of Cleveland. But he's also his family also is a part, the owners of the Cleveland Indians, and got rid of the name Chief Wahoo or whatever his name was. So
I think one thing to remember, though, I think courtesy of President Trump, there's probably more people paying attention now than there have been at any point in my 51 years.
That's true.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Agreed. We're going to move on to our next question. We have Philip lined up next. Philip, go ahead with your question.
Yes, hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Sweet. Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm a school teacher down in Southern Ohio. Naturally, I live on the border between, West Virginia and Kentucky and Ohio in the tri-state area. And talking to some friends in West Virginia, especially law enforcement, it's my understanding that West Virginia and their sanctuary state status intends to more or less ignore federal gun law or passing federal gun legislation, which in my mind is fantastic. But and again, even with, like you were saying, House Bill, I believe 66 you mentioned, where we would restrict the usage of states or of our state's capabilities to enforce laws, wouldn't that still expose citizens who are inadvertently breaking federal law but not state law? And how do we protect our state's citizens from the federal government?
I'll take that one if nobody else wants to.
Sounds like right up your alley.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so House Bill 62 is the Second Amendment Preservation Act. And you're right, it wouldn't do anything for gun owners if there was no enforcement mechanism. If you think back to the 1990s and actually the Obama era, a lot of states were passing firearms freedom acts that really left the decision about whether or not a state was going to protect their citizens up to the state's attorney general. Now, I'm not here to render an opinion on our current state attorney general, but we never know who the next one is going to be. So House Bill 62 has a beautiful enforcement mechanism in it, in that if you do have your Second Amendment freedoms trampled upon, you instantly have the ability, and it makes it very clear in the ORC, that you have standing to go and sue someone, a political entity, a law enforcement agency, in civil court for redress for that infringement. You immediately can go to court and get that fixed. So we don't. The way House Bill 62 is constructed, we don't make it so that you're reliant upon government to protect you from government. We don't. That's not very effective. So it gives you the ability to bring suit against those who are trampling on your freedoms.
Look, the one thing I would add to that is Ohio has to become stronger in many ways. We have to be able to compete economically. The governor, the leadership of Ohio should be willing to do multiple things. They should be able to walk and chew gum. They should be able to fix the unemployment system. They should be able to take care of COVID, if that's, some of the issues that they want to look at. They should be able to bring jobs to the state, but they should also be able to protect our Second Amendment rights. We should be able to have a strong enough state that says no more federal government. You're not going to tell us what to do. We're going to be a state that can stand on its own. And again, if you go back to the original states gave the federal government limited power. They now are taking absolute power, and we need our state to become stronger so that we're not having to deal with this absolute power of the federal government.
That's the federal government's trying to step in right now in our election process, which, obviously is a state's issue.
That's a whole nother topic, John, and I agree with you 100%.
Agreed. We're going to move on to our next question and not go down the election rabbit hole. Dennis is up next. Go ahead, Dennis.
Oh, thank you. This is Danny Crouch from Beaver Creek, Ohio, and appreciate the opportunity. On the gun issues, we talked about how bad it was, how bad the red flag laws are, and that's been around for quite a while now. And obviously, DeWine has pushed that a lot. But there's one thing in there that I still wonder about, because I think there's a necessity to ensure that people that are not mentally capable don't get guns. Now, you talked about it being in the red flag laws, and that could be a problem, and maybe it is, but there seems to be some way that we could get that out of red flag or into another area and be able to get it through the legislature and get it approved. But I do believe there's a need that people with a mental at a level understand all the issues there, that there has to be a way to prevent them from getting a gun. Is there a way that you think that they can combine the mental health laws or the red flag laws, pull that out of there and deal with that alone? Because we all know that's caused quite a few of the major incidents we've had.
Well, I guess before Chris jumps in, because I know he's going to jump in here, I guess one of the things that concerns me is right here that the shooters in Dayton, had a juvenile record that was expunged. I think the Boulder shooter had a juvenile record that was expunged. The shooter in Florida had a juvenile record that the schools and the sheriff's department did not report to anyone. So, I mean, a lot of these shooters have had, a known record, but yet because of schools not wanting negative things put out and whatnot, a lot of these juveniles' history is hidden, and it shouldn't be. I mean, we know these people are issues, and then we allow them to, continue with expunged records once they become 18.
Well, the only thing else that I would add, keep in mind before we go over to Chris, is that we do need to put more resources toward mental health issues. We need to be able to make sure that we're taking care of those that have mental health issues. And then if you're adjudicated, mentally adjudicated, that's an issue right there. You cannot have a firearm. If we're taking care of those, we'll know more about them. Today, we've totally walked away from handling mental health issues. We need to be able to, if we're going to put resources towards something, let's do that. But let's not put resources away towards taking away guns. Chris?
Yeah, I would say to the questioner, I already forgot his name. I think it was Denny. I would say that we already have the ability to deal with this under Ohio's current law. We have what's called the pink slip law that allows you to go and petition the court and go through this process if you think somebody does have a serious problem. And you can do that. We already have that in existing law. The problem becomes when people like DeWine want to expand that current law that allows them to do that. You see, a lot of times we've seen this many times. We saw it just this last week or just this week. The FBI or local police, they already know something about a potential killer, and yet they didn't go through the existing process to deal with that. Instead, what they say is, oh, government failed. Now we have to pass massive expansions and further infringe on everybody's rights in the hopes of trying to in the hopes of trying to narrow in on this person over here. It just isn't true. The fact of the matter is, the firearms themselves or the availability of firearms is not a causal factor in what generates these violent crimes, these killing sprees. It's the evil in their hearts. And if we're going to deal with that issue, we can't look at the inanimate object. We've got to start looking at what's being done in our schools. They've driven God out of the schools. They've driven right and wrong out of the schools. They give our kids all kinds of pharmaceutical things, and they're turning these kids into killers. That is more of the causal problem, and dealing with this and trying to blame guns as the problem is simply going to erode our freedoms.
Great answer, guys. We're going to move on to our next question. That is Aaron Allen. Aaron, go ahead and click unmute and ask your question.
Good evening. So I live in Northwest Ohio, and my question is, what is the Republican Party doing to stand up to these things? It seems like we vote in people into power, and time again, they get up against a little resistance and they fold. So it seems to me that a lot of people in my area are getting disenfranchised with the leadership because they won't do anything. You have the radical left that will stand up and just beat the drum and beat the drum. But then when it comes to Republicans do the same thing, they fold. So my question is, what are we going to do to get some leadership that stands up to the other side and really take care of the people that voted them in?
Well, let me start there, because I wrote a book on politics and politicians. I became a federal member of Congress and realized that the system is broken because too often true politicians only worry about the next election. You heard Chris earlier talk about they're going to make decisions that only get them to the next election. And they worry about how to get reelected. You just answered the question.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be reelecting people who are not defending and supporting our Second Right Amendments, our First Amendment rights, and we should be questioning them. The good thing about our forums like tonight is we're bringing those to your attention. We're asking you to remember this when it comes to the 2022 elections, to start looking for people who are going to step up and defend your Second Amendment rights, defend your First Amendment rights, but also be willing to take Ohio, future into a place for our children and grandchildren, a better Ohio. This is pretty simple. You have hit the nail on the head. Too often, they're more worried about their committee assignments. They're more worried about getting a bill. By the way, and Chris and John and I were talking about this before we came on live. Remember, if you wanted to put a bill in the state house, you want to get a bill passed, you got to get the governor to sign it. So if you go against the governor, you'll never get a bill signed. These are the kind of things that we really need strong people who aren't in those positions because they want a bill passed. They're in those positions because they want to make a difference. Chris, John, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just say that, I mean, obviously you need to do a better job research on who the conservative candidates are in any of the races. I think the caller alluded to the fact that, they were disenfranchised with the party and some of the elected officials within the party. I stress to people, there's one position in the state that kind of gets overlooked that I don't think a lot of people know much about or who's on that committee, and that's the State Central Committee. Each Senate district in the state of Ohio has a man and a woman that represents all the Senate districts in the state, and they represent the State Central Committee. Those State Central Committee members then vote to endorse candidates or whether to not to endorse candidates in the state party. And once they endorse candidates, they turn off resources to other candidates in Republican primaries. So therefore, we really need to get some good conservative Republicans on the State Central Committee that want to allow the voters to decide who's going to win primaries and not necessarily have those primaries influenced by the state Republican Party, because they really can direct resources and whatnot to candidates that conservatives may not necessarily support. So that's one position that a lot of people in the state don't have a lot of understanding about, but they really can control whether or not the state funnels a lot of resources to specific candidates.
Chris, you have any comments?
Yeah, well, I would say that Republicans are just too nice. I mean, half the time, half the time is we have these Republican traitors who aren't delivering for us, who don't do the things they say at election time once they get in there, and then when election time comes around, we all just sit there and vote for the same people again, and we expect different results. The Democrats, even though I despise their worldview, I despise what they stand for, they do a very good job of making sure that the people in their party toe the line. And if they don't, they go after them and replace them. That's exactly what gun owners need to do and First Amendment advocates need to do. When our side isn't towing the line, we need to go in there, clean it out, and maybe a district goes Democrat for an election or two. That's okay. But we can't let the Republicans get worse and worse and worse, because the results will match it the entire time.
One thing I will add, and I saw a comment come across the chat. Somebody said we need none of the above. The truth of it is, if the Democrat is an unworthy choice, which is 99.9%, maybe 99.999%, the Democrat is an unlikely choice. The answer always is, well, I'd rather have the Republican then. The truth of it is, sometimes the Republican is just as bad as the Democrat, but we'll vote for somebody with an R after their name. And look, I'm a strong supporter of the Republican Party, but I'm a supporter of Republican policies and principles. And if that Republican doesn't meet the policies and principles of the Republican Party, is he or she really a Republican? And you're voting for a Republican just because they have the R after their name? Sometimes in the end, it's best maybe not to vote for either candidate, because neither of them represent the Republican Party and the Republican policies and principles. And then you'll say, well, then the Democrat might win. Well, I think Chris mentioned that. Yep, we may have that occur, but it'll actually make us stronger when people realize we're not just going to put R's in because they have an R after their name.
I can't agree. I can't disagree with that at all. I mean, once in a while, I think you need a good slap in the face to wake you up sometimes and say, hey, look, the base is not happy with what's happening here. And I think, what's happening in Columbus right now, there's a whole lot of people in that base that aren't real happy.
Yep.
Great points. Our next question is from Nancy Skur. Go ahead and unmute and chime in with your question.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Nancy Skur, and I'm a social media warrior for Convention of States. And this is the reason why I came on your show. We're a very conservative group and are facing problems with big tech. So we have to choose other avenues by which to spread the information. We are in a situation that we need to become active. We cannot sit around and wait for the final shoe to drop. Conventions of States is going to help reverse some of the problems that we're seeing in our federal government. They support term limits. This is not just for the entrenched politicians, for the administrative elites that are reinvest into the original problem of corruption. They also address physical restraints, which is the deficit. I'm sure you're all aware about how big our deficit's going to grow in response to the Biden administration. And it also restricts the power, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government. This protects them from packing the courts, Supreme Court. This is so important. And all you gotta do is sign a petition. It is so hard. You go to conventionofstates.com, you click, sign the petition, and then legislators get the number of the petition signed. When we reach 100,000, they will entertain our bills.
Well, I appreciate that information. I do believe that we need a strong Ohio voice when it comes to amendments to the Constitution. Even if we don't have a Convention of States, we should be joining up with the other states to, for a couple things. Balanced budget amendment is one, and number two, of course, is term limits. But I agree with you. We need to make sure that we become strong enough so that our leadership can do more than just one thing at a time. And one of those things is to strengthen our state and take back our rights. By the way, there was one comment. I'm watching the chat that said a half a Republican is better than a full Democrat. I'm not sure about that sometimes. And I think what you really have to look at, think about that comment there. If a half a Republican says they don't support the Second Amendment, they don't support the First Amendment rights, just those two things alone, they're not pro-life, but they're everything else Republican. We'll call them a half a Republican. Are they really Republican? I mean, so I think that's the way you really have to look at it when it comes to just deciding which candidate you're going to vote for.
I agree with that 100%, because I mean, we always ask people, what would you rather prefer? Would you rather have the enemy, or the enemy in front of you pounding his spear on the ground and looking at you head on, or would you rather have the enemy amongst you behind the city wall, walking amongst you, ready to plant a knife in your back? That's what Mike DeWine has done. That's what Matt Dolan has done. That's what Stephanie Kunze is doing. And they do great harm to our freedoms, far more so than a Democrat would in those situations, because the treachery they deal is done under the name of Republican. And that is a cancer that must not be allowed to grow within the Republican Party, because then we get in big trouble, big trouble.
We have them in Columbus and DC.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that question, Nancy. We're going to move on to our next question. Comes from Brenda. Brenda, go ahead and unmute and ask your question tonight. Brenda, are you there? You have to click the unmute in the corner of your screen. We have you queued up. If not, we'll move on to Jeannie.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
There she is. There, go ahead, Brenda. We got
I'm
you.
so sorry, guys. Good evening. Thank you for taking my question. My question is, in all this, where do the sheriffs fall in? I guess my question is, I heard that the sheriff has, I guess, the authority to say yes or no for the federal government to come into their counties and agree to, let's say, taking our guns. What truth is in all that?
Chris, you want to answer?
Sure. I mean, yeah, the sheriff is a constitutional office holder, and they're the highest office within that county. And so not only do they have the ability, but I think they have the duty, if federal government gets out of control, if state government, if state laws get out of control, I would say that your local county sheriff has the duty. They took an oath to uphold that Constitution. And so it's their job to get in the way, to get in between the rights of the individual and those onerous gun control laws. And so I would agree with that. It's not a very popular opinion amongst sheriffs. We could be electing a lot better sheriffs in Ohio, but it's there's definitely truth there.
I think we do have some, unfortunately, we do have some pretty strong, good conservative sheriffs in Southwest Ohio here, Sheriff Jones and the Warren County Sheriff and Sheriff Fisher here in Greene County. So we do have some good conservative sheriffs as well.
But by the way, I do watch the comments as well. There's one comment: Mike DeWine would never have been able to do what he's getting done if he was a Democrat. The Republican House and Senate would have overridden every move he's made. Interesting comment. I've heard that multiple times. It's one of the problems with having, it's very difficult for legislators to go against their governor when their governor signs the bills they're trying to get passed. Go ahead, Tom.
Yep. Thanks for that question. We have another question here from Jeannie Schultz. Get her queued up here just a second. And there she goes. There you go. Go ahead, Jeannie. We have you.
Hi, gentlemen. So I guess my question is, I guess I don't understand why all the animosity, given that DeWine signed the heartbeat bill, a massive tax cut, and standard.
We lose her.
She cut out.
I think I heard part of it. My answer would be, yes, he did sign the heartbeat. You can sign one or two things. It's what you've done, what you haven't done. He did sign stand your ground under a lot of pressure from conservatives, and I think that's very positive. He signed stand your ground. So these are things that should these aren't things that should be we have to fight for, we have to push for. Any Republican leader to say, I'm pro-choice, pro-choice, I'm pro-life. So I think that our leaders like a Republican. John, Chris.
Yeah, I caught a little bit of what you said there, Jim, and I want to key in on that for just a second, because you said that these are the easiest of things for him to have done, and it took an awful lot of pressure to get him to do it. You know, during the campaign season, they say, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other thing. And it was instead, and, you know, I caught some edginess in that question there. Like it was kind of a scolding perhaps, but when it came to stand your ground law, if you remember correctly, in the press conferences after the Dayton shooting, DeWine was asked by a member of the media, what about the pro-gun bills? And he said, I'm not interested in talking about the pro-gun bills until we've dealt with strong Ohio. And so gun owners, the wonderful members of Ohio gun owners, had to mount up a tidal wave of pressure in order to force him into that kind of that political box and get him to sign it. It shouldn't be that hard. It should not be that hard. It should be very easy. In fact, it should be one of the very first things that these Republican governors do when they get into office, is say, hey, all right, we've got the votes. Let's pass the pro-life bills, the pro-gun bills. Let's not fund these gun control organizations coming into our schools and teaching kids to hate America, like he did when he signed House Bill 123 into law. So, you know, nice try, I would say, but you know, conservatives are having to expend massive amounts of energy to get him to do the basics. And we're not looking for a basics kind of a person anymore. We need somebody who will fight for these issues.
Yeah, I think you have to question the timing on the stand your ground legislation when it was signed into law as well a little bit.
Yeah, and by the way, hopefully you can hear us. I'm saying they're having a hard time hearing me. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm using my phone to try and add to my voice capabilities here. But Chris said something important. When we have Republicans in the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, the easy things should just be natural. They should just move right through, and then we can move and get things done. Look at the federal government. They got the presidency, they got the House and the Senate, and they are moving forward with all of their basic principles. They're not even thinking about anything else. And it's pretty simple for them because they already know what they believe in and they're moving forward. We're fighting over the things that we shouldn't have to even be thinking twice about.
Well, I think Chris brought it up earlier. Democrats do a nice job, a great job of sticking together through thick and thin, and Republicans tend not to be so strong.
Why can't our side just show the courage that the left does?
I think President Trump was the first one to ever teach a Republican how to hit back when he got hit.
Amen.
Well,
Yep.
by the
Yeah.
way, bringing President Trump into that situation is really good because President Trump was not afraid to take on other Republicans. People get mad when Republicans take on Republicans, but yet President Trump was willing to do it.
Yeah, and I think every good politician needs called out once in a while. And President Trump wasn't scared to call people out within his own party. And I think we need more honesty that way.
Yeah. One thing I really liked about President Trump when it came to guns is, you know, after the Parkland, Florida shooting, he came out and said, yeah, let's take the guns. We'll deal with the due process later. Well, Ohio gun owners got together with a whole bunch of gun rights groups across America and said, that's not what you're supposed to do. And guess what? He didn't do it. He walked back from it. We like that. That's very good. Very rare in politics.
Great points. I'm going to read a question off from the question and answer section here on Zoom. And it kind of goes back to something we talked about a little bit ago, but this is a kind of a good point. This comes from Linda Reynolds. It says, I see the federal administration is threatening states who have gun sanctuary policies by withholding federal funding. I kind of have a feeling where a lot of you stand on this, but she wants to see where you guys stand on that topic, the federal funding withholding.
Well, Tom, I'll jump right in on that. And again, I apologize if my voice coming through is bad. Hopefully you can hear me. But I've said all along, we need to get away from all federal funding to our state so we don't have to listen to the federal government. Right now, 23% of our entire federal budget is funded, or our entire state budget is funded, and that's before COVID. It's even bigger now, taking the COVID. 23% of our entire state budget is federal funding. We have to listen to the federal government for education issues, for Medicaid issues. We have to listen to them for everything because we take their money. The answer is, let's start to do what other states are doing. Let's become a strong state on its own. And let's eliminate some of this federal funding and some of the mandates that come along with it.
Preach it. It's kind of like getting a loan from a mob boss, right? You can't just pay them back. Once you take the loan, once you take the money, they got you for life. We need to, and it's the same with the federal government. It's the same with the federal gun control bills. It's the same with this whole agenda that Biden is trying to pass. They can't, the federal government doesn't have enough law enforcement to enforce its own laws. So what they do is they bribe the states and get the states to enforce the laws because they give them money, they give them equipment, they give them this, they give them that. And that's how they get the state to be their puppets. So we got to stand up against that. We got to cut that umbilical cord at some point and say, no, we're going to, as a state, we're going to take care of ourselves. We don't need the big nanny federal government anymore. And yeah, great point.
Agree.
We're going to take one last question tonight, then we'll let Chris and John give their final thoughts, and we'll go to Jim for his closing thought. Last question tonight comes from Catherine Byers.
Hi, everyone. My question, I guess, could go to the whole panel. So in regards to our elected officials, obviously they take an oath to uphold the Constitution. But my question is about the accountability. So when they are writing legislation that goes against our constitutional rights, which we're seeing so much of now, how can we hold them accountable as far as, impeachment, or is it simply just waiting until their term expires and then replacing them, and primarying them out? I just would hate to see us continue to have to wait, another term, when we see this anti-constitutional legislation presented. Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
I tell people all the time when they talk about accountability, we hold our politicians accountable, unfortunately, right through the ballot box. People need to become active. They need to help these candidates running against these individuals that don't support the Constitution. They need to help fund those candidates that don't support the Constitution, because in the United States of America, that's how we hold our politicians accountable, is through the ballot box.
Well, and one thing I would also tell you is that there is no recall in the state of Ohio, but there probably should be. So we should get our legislators to pass legislation that allows for a recall. They can recall, the legislature can recall, some of our leaders. We had Representative Becker put an impeachment, because I know you mentioned the word impeachment. He put an impeachment bill through, resolution through, I should say. Got very little support, because you got to remember, and Chris mentioned this before, and John talked about it. They're trying to go after the guy who signs the bill you're trying to get passed later on. So it's very difficult to go after leaders, especially within your own same party. So it really gets back to what John said. You got to hold people accountable every 2 years or every 4 years. And we got to do that at the ballot box. One of the things Ohio Futures Foundation is trying to do is give you the ability to know what's going on. Too often, I say this all the time, people forget, and they only start thinking about the political election process 30 days before the election. If the best example I can give you, if you go back to the 2018 primary between Mary Taylor and Governor DeWine, Governor DeWine said he went after Mary Taylor for Medicaid expansion. In fact, he ran commercials and said that he did not support Medicaid expansion, which is, by the way, just eating up our entire budget. But as soon as he got the nod, he then endorsed Medicaid expansion. So there's the perfect example of a total flip-flop after you get the primary endorsement. And I think we can talk about gun because that's the topic of tonight. You got to remember that Governor DeWine said he was gun rights until he became governor. And now we've seen the actions that he's taken. And these are the just remind these forums so that they can be more knowledgeable when the ballot election comes forward and make their decisions based on a more informative decision. Chris, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just say, what is it? No, known universal truth that is politicians are like diapers. They need to be changed and often and for the same reason. And what I think I heard Jim say something about this just a second ago, but one of the things, we have this real problem when people only pay attention 30 days before an election. One of the biggest things we can do is start running for local offices. We need great people in the legislature. Some people don't think that they're qualified to do it. I've seen a lot of those people in the legislature. Believe me, if you're watching right now, chances are you're more than qualified than most of these people. But if you start local, your local city council, your local school board, so many of the things that affect our everyday life can be changed at that local level. But guess what? If you get in there, it's a great farm team for getting bumped up to the next level, into the state legislature, to the state Senate, and then even beyond. And so it's time for everybody to get involved. If you're on the bleachers and not on the court playing, it's time now because we can't wait any longer. So that's what I would say about that. Yes, hold them accountable. It's a tragedy we don't have a way to, especially right after they betray us with their votes. We always want to just go and make them get out of office. But you know what? Let's put in the work and let's make sure that we go after them in the next election season with better candidates. That's one of the best things that we can do is primary them.
Yeah, and I don't think people. Sometimes people are apprehensive to have those conversations with their elected representatives and whatnot. Pick up the phone and call them, leave them a message, say, hey, call me back, and have those conversations with them. They're just like you and I, and you have to hold them accountable by actually picking up the phone and having that heart-to-heart conversation with them yourself.
By the way, I wanted to add to what John said and what Chris said. Look, our politicians put on the just the same way as we all do. and skirts and so forth. And you know what? They're one of us. You can call them up. You need to be respectful. You shouldn't scream and holler, but you should challenge them. Challenging them respectfully, there's nothing wrong with it. Look, when I was in Congress, I had town halls and people challenged me and I was okay with it. In fact, sometimes I loved the challenge because I would able to respond with facts. But going back to what Chris said, everybody, when I went to Washington, here's a guy who created jobs, employed people, started from nothing. I got there and I looked around and said, wow, how did I get here? And then I looked at everybody else and said, how did they get here? I mean, in a lot of ways, so many people have stepped into the arena that aren't as qualified as you or many of you on this town hall tonight. And we need you to step up, like Chris said, get into those local offices, be a part of changing your city, your county, and then your state. And that's where it all starts.
Mhm.
Great. That's going to wrap up the questions tonight. And Jim, your audio is still a little bit screwy, so we're gonna wrap up tonight. I'm gonna let John say any final thoughts, then Chris, and then Jim, if you want to wrap up from there.
I just want to thank Jim for the opportunity again to participate tonight. It's been an enjoyment. I think more and more people are starting to pay attention. More and more people are participating in town halls and Zoom calls such as these. The more we get the word out about conservatives and the more we can promote conservative candidates, we'll start seeing the tide shift in Ohio. If you go back and you watch a lot of Jim's previous town halls, you'll really educate yourself on some of the real dire topics that need addressed in the state of Ohio. And I think that's what really attracts me to Jim and his positions, because I started paying attention, and he was stating the same things I was stating about the state of Ohio. So I encourage people to go back and watch some of those previous town halls if they haven't seen some of the ones that are already saved on his website.
Thank you, John. Chris, you want to talk a little bit about your organization?
Yeah. If you love freedom, if you love this country, if you love our rights and you want to protect them for your kids and your grandkids and the future generations to follow, if you don't want to look back or have history look back on this generation and say, hey, they were a bunch of losers who gave up so much, we would welcome you here at Ohio Gun Owners. You can go to joinogo.com and sign up and become a member. You can go to facebook.com/like Ohio Gun Owners to follow us on Facebook. But yeah, that's the name of the game now. It's engagement and activism, and making sure that whatever these politicians do to us during the legislative season, we do back to them at election time. That's what we got to do. Sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's a lot of fun. But it is time to stand up and start defending our freedoms, because if we don't, we're not going to have any left. Thanks a lot for inviting me tonight. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, John. And for those on the call tonight, again, I apologize if you saw me tonight where I'm sitting. I have 3 computers up and I got my cell phone talking into my cell phone. So I apologize. This is actually the first time we had a technical problem on our end. But look, thank you for being here tonight. You can learn more about what our organization, what we're doing at OhioFutureFoundation.org, or if you really want to join the movement, go to jimrenacci.com, JIMRENACCI.com/join. We're looking for team captains and county captains so we can continue to get our message out about some of these issues we're talking about on not only this town hall, but other town halls. If you like what you're hearing, go to facebook.com/Jim Renacci. You're going to see messaging on a regular basis, or twitter.com/Jim Renacci. Again, I want to thank John and Chris. I think this was a great discussion. And look, God bless you all for being on here tonight. God bless the state of Ohio. God bless this great country, the United States.
Amen. Thank you.